case of the Kabbalists, this presents a semi-Western face for our examination. It is a rather compact package. It involves a limited group of persons, yet it is wonderfully symbolical of the entire world procedure. Not only are we concerned with these extraordinary coincidences and the timing, but we are also somewhat concerned with the internal symbolism of the various revelations that arose in a half a dozen areas of world culture at the same time. In the symbolism, we also seem to sense a relatedness. The symbolism would almost suggest that a number of people had read the same book or had become aware of the same basic facts or had attained to the same basic conviction and had then unfolded this illumination in terms familiar to their own people or in terms at least partly acceptable to the entrenched traditionalism of the areas in which they existed. Well, we must realize that all of these groups were opposed as they rose. They all passed through certain persecutions. They created resentments. They were declared to be heretical by someone. And perhaps it was this very persecution that gave to each of them the strong substance of survival. For we know things under persecution develop a tremendous strength and an integration that can never be found in more fortunate environments. So we have now a world situation, and I think that the Dead Sea Scrolls situation more or less fits into this. These scrolls are assumed to have been originally preserved or put away in the earth sometime in this interval between 100 BC and 100 AD. We also have to remember that in these scrolls there are strong indications of a heterodox attitude arising among Jewish mystical sects. I am no way convinced that these scrolls are Essene products. I do not think the Essenian community can be actually the source of them, although it may well have been the preserver of the old manuscripts. The Essenes themselves were a transition group between Orthodox Judaism and mysticism, and their entire history is noted only in these two mysterious centuries. After that, they disappear utterly from the pages of record and account. We do not know what happened to them, but they form part of this strange bridge of doctrines that seem to connect an old world with a new concept of life. How shall we distinguish this new concept of life, for instance, in terms of our Kabbalism? The great book of the Kabbalah, certainly its outstanding text today, is the Sefer HaZohar, or the Book of the Splendors. This was first given to the world around the 12th or 13th century by Rabbi Moses de Leon. He insisted that he transcribed it from an ancient work. For nearly 300 years, perhaps 400 years, historians have thrown the lie to his teeth. They have said that Rabbi Moses wrote the work himself, that it had no roots in antiquity, and probably little, if any, roots in tradition. However, in the last century, our broadening knowledge of world culture has caused a general change of opinion. And even so conservative a publication as the Encyclopedia Britannica, which can never be said to give much benefit to abstractions, their article on the Kabbalah states as the modern point of view that it is very probable that Rabbi Moses of Leon either was in possession of an earlier manuscript or was in possession of a valid oral tradition, and that in all probabilities he was perfectly honest and perfectly sincere and entirely truthful in attributing the Zohar to a very much earlier date than the medieval scholars had admitted. According to Rabbi Moses, this work was actually written about the beginning of the Christian era, just at this particularly critical time during the reign of the Roman Emperor Vespasian. Persecuted by the Romans and by the more traditionally bound members of the Sanhedrin, Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai retired to a cave with his son. And in this cave he was visited by one of the angelic host. And through this angelic visitor and the intercession of the early prophets, he is said to have recorded the Book of the Splendors, the Sefer HaZohar. We have at this time no reason to doubt that this book is a genuine midrash of Rabbi Simeon. That is, it was a work prepared by him, or at least committed to memory as the result of instruction which he gave. This particular work changed the entire complexion of Jewish thought. It belongs just as certainly to this transition period as the wonderful books found by Nagarjuna in the Iron Tower in India at almost exactly the same date. All this adds to the concept that prevails in the writings of Rabbi Simeon and in a parallel group of material prepared by Rabbi Akiba. A little later, Philo Judaeus, the most articulate philosophical spokesman of the Greco-Jewish school, expanded this concept of Jewish mysticism far more than had been previously possible, and mingled its courses very closely with Neoplatonism. This was a very interesting time, a time of strange beliefs. Each people, in its own way, has explained the reason why that particular period should have produced these curious consequences. But there must have been some broader underlying generality which binds these together and makes them into one united idea. For example, among the teachings that arose among the Kabbalists, and probably may be traced back to Simeon ben Yochai in the first century, is the doctrine of Gilgulim. This particular doctrine is not commonly found in the West during the period of the so-called rise of Kabbalism. The word simply means the doctrine of rebirth. Now, the Orthodox Jewish people had certain beliefs about this, but they were not at all clearly defined. It is held that the Pharisees did hold this doctrine in some estimation, and certain sects also regarded it highly. But with the rise of Kabbalism, it burst upon the philosophic mind of Europe. Now, here